Hey, Bill. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Did you see anything good on television last night?
As I was watching, I was worried if you and your conservative blogger brethren were running out of popcorn.
Yes, I think for most conservatives it was an entertaining, if not in some ways somber night. That was kind of one of the other things people noticed last night is the whole tone of the debate was just kind of like I was going to call it a funeral, but Jonah Goldberg said it was like you walked into a house after the parents had just fought and everyone was just kind of on edge. I thought that was a good recap of what the tone was last night.
I mean, these guys just have to be just flat out beat.
Yes. There was no hope and joy in that debate last night.
No. But what's interesting that within the liberal blogosphere there was a very spontaneous reaction to the debate at sheer disgust at ABC for the direction of the questioning for the first hour of the debate having no policy discussion at all and essentially being a discussion of one manufactured outrage after the next. Added to the fact that we learned the question about William Ayers was spoon-fed to George Stephanopoulos from Sean Hannity. And there was audio of that.
Run down that for me, because I had seen on the Corner and other conservative blogs that people said, oh, Hannity brought this up earlier in the day, and that Hannity had been pushing the story for a while. But is there specific audio linking Gibson to Hannity?
Stephanopoulos.
Oh, George.
That Stephanopoulos was on Hannity's show.
Oh.
And Hannity said, you should ask this, and that Stephanopoulos said, I didn't hear the audio myself. I just read some of the descriptions of it. I think that was actually on the Corner blog as well as liberal blogs.
Well, go right-wing noise machine, go. Yay, team.
So, and if I may say, on our Campaign for America's Futures blog, I and one of my other fellow brethren had suggested our own questions for the debate, and somehow they didn't get discussed. So we're not...
Well, that's because you didn't have George on your show.
Noise machine.
You didn't have George Stephanopoulos on your show.
Well, that's right. So Uniform discussed over that. Apparently, thousands of negative complaints on ABC's own online repository. Talking Points memo said, "Oh, the inanity," and even beyond the tabloid stuff in the first half, both the New Republic blog and comments from left field hit Charlie Gibson for his capital gains tax question.
Well, before we move on to the issue critique, let's stay on the personal critique just to keep us somewhat focused here. Did you see David Brooks's post on the New York Times?
Yes, the very non-elitist right. David Brooks speaking for the heartland.
Well, I don't think he was defending the debate. I don't know if he really talked about the elite issue at all.
Well, there's a theme here, I think. I mean, I'm going to lump in Handy for a second. I think there's a perception in the traditional media that they have some inherent liberal bias that they can only check if they listen to leading conservatives who have a pipeline into the minds of the heartland, and by asking questions about flag pins and the like, they're asking what's on voters' minds, not planted right-wing questions.
Well, so I don't think that was David's critique.
David's critique was, hey, these are fair questions. Hey, George Bush exposed Michael Dukakis when he went to flag factories. That's Brooks' own language. And I think that ties into this notion that these are the questions that are on voters' minds. And so I wrote on my own blog post on Liberal Oasis. After Pastorgate and after Bittergate, you didn't see all that much movement in the polls, if any at all.
Well,
which I think speaks to the question.
Primary.
Well, even in the National Gallup tracking poll, Obama versus McCain didn't move at all after Bittergate.
It did in some key swing states like Virginia, Ohio, even Pennsylvania. These are states that are going to matter.
Well, I'm not arguing that there is zero impact, but I think the movement of the needle is pretty minor. And looking at the national tracking poll, you had literally zero movement. I think that speaks to a larger, so that the media should be listening to that. A lot of voters are more interested in getting to hear more about the economy and foreign policy, wanting to know what are you really going to do to fix the economy, what are you really going to do to end the occupation in Iraq, and a lot of people are just tuning out all this stuff. So I think it was a bad business decision on ABC's part to put so much emphasis on this.
Yeah, well, it's going to come up again a lot. We have a pattern here. We have Barack Obama associating himself, not even just associating himself, his religious mentor is a raving racist. Now we have him connected to this Weather Underground guy, Ayers. And the response both times by Obama was pretty much the same, moral equivocation. The first time he said Reverend Wright's not that bad. He's just as racist as my grandmother. And this time he says, "Oh, Bill Ayers not that bad." He's just as out there as Tom Coburn. So what we have here is in each of these cases where people say you should not be hanging out with that guy, Obama turns around and says, "Well, that person's not that bad. They're just like my colleague Tom Coburn or my grandmother, etc." But my larger point is. These issues do matter to voters, and I'm reminded of 2000 coverage of George Bush, and I don't remember liberals then saying, you know what, all of George Bush's past cocaine use, DUI stuff, that's irrelevant. Voters want to talk about the issues. Let's not look into his business history. Let's not look at his failed businesses and all the nepotism surrounding how he got to where he is. That's all irrelevant. Let's focus on George Bush's issues. No, of course not. They want to focus on all of that stuff. And looking back on it as a conservative who's unhappy with, shall we say, Heck of a Job Brownie and Harriet Miers and not firing Rumsfeld until after the 2006 elections, I wish more emphasis was focused on the nepotism at the core of George W. Bush. These are key issues that shed light on a person's character and inform the American people what kind of person these candidates are. And so I think the American people, when they look back, say, we should have heard more about the character flaws of George W. Bush. Because, whatever issues you talked about ended up, changing 8 months into his presidency anyways.
Well, I'm not convinced that... I would have much rather the 2000 campaign had a deeper discussion on George Bush's policy prescriptions, because he was very clear about what he wanted to do on Social Security. He was very clear what he wanted to do about judges. And I would have been much, much happier if the 2000 media coverage of 2000 had much more focus on that than a lot of trumped-up manufactured outrage on Al Gore's alleged serial exaggerations, which were wholly ridiculous. I would have not been...
So but are you calling for less or more coverage of George Bush's failed business past?
Honestly, I think George Bush's business past is mildly interesting, but not nearly as relevant.
You don't think the nepotism...
as his record as governor.
You don't think the nepotism, looking back there, at all presaged his administration?
Honestly, I think that's a stretch.
Okay. I don't.
It's fun for me to read about and laugh about and use to make fun of him. But as far as what's primary important in a campaign, it's obviously what his vision for the country is, which, if there was more media coverage of that, because he said plenty of it, would have been a much more healthier campaign and would have had a more, people would be able to make a better informed decision. And of course, they still voted for Gore anyway. But if you want to play the game of guilt by association and say these are true windows into people's souls. I've still yet to hear a conservative explain what Barack Obama serving on a anti-poverty board with someone who did something detestable 40 years ago.
Well, the guy hosted a fundraiser at his house. Let's not, discount this relationship here.
Well, we can go point by point on that if you like. But does that mean that you should be equivalently outraged that John McCain has on the payroll Richard Quinn, who's affiliated with Southern Partisan Magazine, which has a history of racism? Richard Quinn himself disparaging Martin Luther King, a magazine that promoted David Duke. This was brought up in the 2000 campaign with McCain. But he's still around. He's still on the McCain campaign.
Yeah.
Should I now presume that John McCain is a racist because there's someone on his staff who is a racist?
Well, and let's link that debate. I mean, obviously, each of these data points isn't going to be a deciding factor. But let's look at, the pattern that Obama's built up with Wright and Ayers and McCain's pattern.
Please specify to me what these quote-unquote associations say about Obama and what he says, what's in his record. What do they actually say?
They say he has bad judgment. When we first had our discussion on Reverend Wright, we talked about this. It says
to clarify,
they do not about who he associates with.
You are strictly talking political judgment. You are saying that they do not mean
not just political judgment.
They do not mean he is un-American. They do not mean he is sympathetic to terrorism. They do not mean he's anti-Semitic. They only mean he has bad judgment. Is that what you were saying?
Barack Obama is running as a person who's going to heal our nation's wounds. Our nation's racial wounds, yes. Bring us together, unite her, hippity-hope, whatever. And so when it came time to appoint people to his campaign's board of racial unity, he chose Reverend Wright, who, in retrospect, doesn't foster racial unity. That shows judgment that a president will have to use when appointing people to the Civil Rights Commission, when appointing people to the Justice Department, when appointing people to courts. It's bad judgment. And presidents exercise lots of judgment about who they appoint to where. So the fact that Obama appointed this guy to his racial unity group for his campaign shows he has bad judgment.
So you then agree that it does not say that he himself is a racist, it does not say that he is un-American, it does not say he is anti-Semitic, and it does not say he's sympathetic to terrorism.
I don't think I ever said any of those things. We can go back to the last session. I never said any of those things.
I just want to specify that. So to the extent you want to talk about judgment, I think that's a perfectly fine discussion. And I would urge folks to read, and I think it's true not just in terms of talking about Obama himself, but in terms about where we want our politics to go. Read Obama's full race relations speech. In that speech, he's specifically saying, I think this goes to the question of judgment. He is saying that it is effectively silly to fully disown people who are complicated and flawed, and discount all the good works that they do if they allow certain anger to bubble up in a counterproductive way. Well, I think that should apply on both sides of the spectrum. And maybe I would not have done this in 2000. Maybe I would have said in 2000, and I'm sure I did in some forum, that John McCain shouldn't be associated with the racist guy from the Southern Partisan. Let's have the equivalent standard here and say, just because someone has said a racist thing in the past, let's not blow that up out of proportion and say that anyone who's ever been associated with this guy should be persona non grata, and let's actually focus on what the entirety of their records are and their visions for the country and debate that. And I respect Obama's judgment for saying, I'm not going to pillory every single person I've ever crossed paths with for every last thing that they've done.
Yeah. See, the thing about that is, I don't think anyone's saying, I think the whole issue of it's silly whether or not he was supposed to denounce him or really denounce him or throw him under the bus or whatever. I wasn't expecting him to do any of that. The goose is already cooked at that point. It's what it says about his judgment to a point of the board. And, Barack Obama makes it sound like Reverend Wright said one or two controversial things once, and I got on YouTube, and that's it. But as Charlie Gibson's quote last night shows, this is simply not true. Obama, told him you can go a little offhand when you're in your sermons, you can get a little heated, so I'm going to have to distance myself from you. So Obama knew he said stuff like this. Not that there were one or two occasions where he said divisive stuff, but that this was who he was. And Obama admitted in that same speech, again, I encourage everyone to read it, that Obama knew he had divisive views. That's a big admission by Obama's part in that speech. And yet, despite the fact that Obama knew...
I think you're conflating a lot of things right now.
No. But in the speech, does not Obama say that Reverend Wright does have divisive views that he disagrees with? Obama says that in the speech.
I think, I'll let Obama speak for himself. I don't think he's saying that his pastor has divisive views fundamentally.
You can go back. He says he has divisive views on certain things, including race. And Obama knew this and went ahead and appointed him to his Racial Healing Commission. I don't know the exact name. But it was an official campaign. It was an official campaign body. But getting out of the weeds on the Obama issue, I thought Marcos raised a good point in one of his debate recaps. He linked to an article from Editor and Publisher talking about how Hillary Clinton and more Barack Obama really missed an opportunity to turn the tables on ABC and call them out for not talking about issues that matter to voters. And this was something that Hillary Clinton did masterfully very early on in the debate, not in this debate, but in the campaign a number of times. I remember having a blogging heads with McJoan from Daily Kos, and we were talking about this very thing. And that in the first 3 or 4 debates, whether it was, I forget who the early commentators were, the early moderators were, but whenever the moderators would start asking a string of these kind of personal questions that weren't really to do with issues, Hillary would upbraid them, would call them out on it. And at the time, when she was still the front runner and Obama kind of was still in the rest of the pack, it really made her seem kind of up and above everything else. And I think Obama missed a huge opportunity to take that same step last night, because I saw that after the speech, or after the debate, Gibson and Stephanopoulos were jeered by some people in the crowd. So there obviously was a feeling within the crowd that they were going over the line, and Obama, a real leader, would have sensed that and called them out on it, and apparently would have had the crowd behind them.
Well, I think the jury's out whether the opportunity was missed or not. Much of Obama's answers, I think you're right that Clinton has done that more confrontationally in past debates. In fact, the last one was the MSNBC debate in Cleveland, which was an unfair pile-on on Clinton for the most part.
And they played that well afterwards. But I'm talking about more of specifically during the debate.
Clinton brought up the SNL skit to say, that all these debates have been, too sweet to Obama, and that was a way to puncture the moderators in the course of the debate. Obama, I think, handled that differently, where he did say, let's not be obsessed with, these gaffes, because they're going to get made by everybody in the course of a long campaign. It's inevitable, but it's going to distract from actual discussion of real issues, which is what people want to focus on. He did that, perhaps in a softer way. He didn't directly criticize the moderators themselves personally. And one thing I think we've learned over, Pastorgate and Bittergate is, let's hear what the voters actually have to say about these things before everyone hyperventilates. It's very possible that the broader reaction to the debate is going to be that was really silly and stupid and reflects more pulling ABC than Obama. So it's very possible that the way Obama handled it will be received well. We don't really know yet.
Well, I thought one turn Obama did have, and if there's one thing Paul Begala teaches you, is that whenever you get a negative question about yourself in debate, you turn it around and use it as an attack on your opponent, was over the Bittergate when he brought up Hillary's cookies line, and about how she doesn't like baking cookies, etc., and just reminded people that Hillary is not exactly a blue-collar girl herself. So I thought that was a great way of both seeming to do it soft-handedly, saying, we all know that's not right about her, but at the same time reminding voters of the issue. Of course, earlier in the week he was much more less lighter about it when he brought up the Annie Oakley line. He said, all of a sudden she's Annie Oakley. I thought that was a great line, made me laugh.
Well, but to the cookies line, I think Obama is still very confident he's going to be the nominee.
So am I.
And I think his point in doing that was, again, to speak to a larger narrative he's trying to say about, I'm offering a new politics, not the old politics. And when these kinds of flaps get manufactured and there's a lot of phony outrage out there, let's just remember that these things have happened in the past, and they are fundamentally silly. I think it was much more a way to inoculate himself from further attacks like this than it was to kind of put a shiv into Clinton and to say, oh, she really is an elitist too.
Yeah, but that's the genius of it, is that it did both.
I'm sorry?
But that's the genius of it, is that it did both.
Oh, you're so cynical, Conn.
I know. What are the odds?
I did notice that after a lot of liberal blogs were critical of ABC, you now have a lot of conservative blogs critical of liberal blogs for being whiny. You mentioned David Brooks. I did notice that Michelle Malkin had her crybaby seal.
Yes.
Up on the site. Does this? I find conservative blogs have a hard time with this. They very much want to keep the liberal media meme going.
Yeah.
But then when there are things like this, when obviously there's no liberal media at play here, does it harm their narrative to acknowledge that ABC was asking a lot of conservative questions?
Well, considering that George Stephanopoulos is an ex-Clinton staffer, not really. Tim worked for Moynihan. Matthews worked for O'Neill.
But they've all handled that in many ways by overcompensating, not by acting like liberals.
Yeah, but at the end, they try to overcompensate, but they do so in ways that caricature what they think conservatism is. Because at their core, they're still liberals. So they're ineffective carriers of the conservative message and questioners.
Well, to go back to what I was talking about at the top, when Charlie Gibson became almost personally outraged that Barack Obama would not acknowledge that cutting capital gains taxes don't magically create more revenue. He really seemed to cross the line from being a mere questioner and to advocating for supply-side economics. And again, the New Republic blog and Comments for Left Field, criticized Gibson on the merits for that.
Well, I think you're overplaying. Obama actually swayed. He said, well, I don't know the fact. He did not challenge that at all. He said, that depends on what the economy is.
That's the point. That it's not the single factor of the cutting of the capital gains tax that brought about the new revenues.
But his data points are still true.
Economic factors out there.
But his data points are still true. What the facts within his question are right. Whether or not there's more surrounding information is another question.
Well, the New Republic blog, they asked economist Jason Furman from Brookings, that said, there's no way you can simply say there's a cause and effect there. There's too many other economic factors to bring in.
Wow, so they got a liberal think tank guy to say that he was wrong. What are the odds?
Is liberal, which I don't.
What are the odds?
Plenty of Bush people in Brookings. And Comments for Left Field noted that what often happens is when the tax rate's about to drop, that people who are planning to sell their stock wait until the tax rate drops, because they know they'll take less of a hit on it, and so you get a short-term spike in sell-offs, which allow for a short-term spike in revenue, but it's not something that's going to last over the long term. It's not fundamentally sparking more growth in the economy.
Yeah, but see, that very point demonstrates what conservative economists call the lock-in effect, and that's what's so bad about the capital gains tax, is that when people know that there is going to be a high tax on it, they hold on assets longer than they would otherwise, and it's a distortionary effect that doesn't allow for a more efficient allocation of capital, which is exactly why we need to get rid of the capital gains tax. But we're getting in the weeds here.
Well, my only point is that this is not a cut-and-dry fact to insist that the candidate must acknowledge, which is how Charlie Carpson approached it.
As something that Obama had to acknowledge. He was just asking Obama to acknowledge the history of it. And then he asked, how will you justify this? And Obama's answer on that was great, is that, revenue, Obama said, is irrelevant because we don't know what's going to happen. It's all about fairness. So let's punish these 50 rich hedge fund managers so that we can, create a more fair tax system, which, oh, by the way, also punishes the hundreds of millions of Americans who own taxes, who own capital gains, or stock, and are affected by capital gains taxes, like retirees, like middle-class families. Jack Kemp had a great op-ed in the Wall Street Journal today talking about how, Obama seems to think that wages are the only way people build wealth, but that's just not true. People build wealth through investments and savings, and capital gains taxes, which Obama wants to raise through the roof, harm people coming up, especially the poorer ones, because capital gains aren't indexed in any way. It's not like income. So the high capital gains rates hurt, the poor millions of Americans middle-class families and retirees way more than it ever hurts the 50 richest hedge fund managers, which, really morally offends Barack Obama.
Well, I don't want to get into a whole debate on capital gains. I don't agree with all those premises. But I would say Obama said two things. One, he said there's a fairness component here, but he also said we need the revenue to invest in healthcare, energy, and the like. So he was not discounting the revenue side of it. I agree he wasn't as explicit as he could have been in rejecting the premise. But inherent in that answer, we need the revenue to do X, Y, and Z, I think does rebut that. And the fairness point, that's saying that conservatives don't talk about getting rid of the estate tax because it's going to be a revenue gainer. They talk about strictly in terms of fairness. And it's been a very compelling argument for conservatives. I think it's a flawed one, but there is something to the notion of tax fairness that I think transcends ideology that people are very receptive to.
Yeah, and, I guess, you don't want to give the nuts and bolts of it, but, just to punish the 50 richest hedge fund managers, a cap gains tax also punishes the hundreds of millions of Americans who are not rich and yet own stock. But there were other issues. We've now transitioned from the scurrilous Reverend Wright bitter portion into the actual issues portion of the review from last night. And there were some other great issues that conservatives really harped on. Number one was Iraq, and conservatives were very happy that they got both candidates on record saying that regardless of what the facts on the ground were, they are going to stick to their campaign promises to withdraw troops, which is something different than Barack Obama's advisor Samantha Power told the BBC. So it's good to have Obama again on the record on that. And then, of course, there were guns, which all of a sudden constitutional scholar Barack Obama, who was an expert on these things, being a constitutional law professor, all of a sudden has no opinion on the Second Amendment because he didn't read the briefs.
There's no opinion on
the Second Amendment because he doesn't read the briefs in the D.C. Heller case.
Okay.
And conservatives thought that was funny.
Do you really think that the fact that he didn't read the briefs in that case is going to really be a compelling issue to flog
Oh,
the
no,
general
I think
election?
it goes to his honesty. I think a lot of people think it's completely BS that he doesn't have an opinion on whether or not the Second Amendment is a individual right and should be upheld in this case because he didn't read the briefs. I think most people think he has an opinion on it, and he's not sharing it for purely political reasons.
For the sake of argument, let's say that that's all true.
Okay.
Like, is anybody really going to care?
Gun owners who vote, ask Al Gore.
Well, I understand that the issue of guns can be an issue, but the specific notion that can you really write an ad saying Barack Obama says he didn't read the briefs, but we really think he did? I mean, is that really going to be that compelling an argument?
Oh, no, the ad would be something more along the lines of Barack Obama says, he's a constitutional law professor, and yet in a debate he said he, didn't have an opinion on the Second Amendment. Something along those lines.
Well, he said he did have an opinion on the Second Amendment. In fact, he said that he believed in individual right, which is a break from what most liberals would say about the Second Amendment. Now, he tried to couple that with saying you can say that it's an individual right and still allow for states and localities to tailor the law to their own situations.
Yeah,
but he has a general view on the Second Amendment.
Yeah, it's great on two levels because, one, gun owners aren't going to believe him. They're going to see.
Well, that may be.
They're going to see that he's just as bad as Hillary on guns. And number two, it shows him to be just as a slimy equivocator politician as everyone else is, which undercuts his whole hoppity change message.
That just seems like a real stretch to me.
Well, he was definitely equivocating on it. We can all agree on that. He was saying yes, there's a Second Amendment right, which of course we know if he wasn't campaigning in Pennsylvania, he never would have admitted. But, there may be some other regulations which I may be in favor of, but of course he's perfectly vague on what they were. So I think, most people who are watching that, most Americans who all the polls say are cynical, would say, wow, he sounds like a regular politician here. Because he did.
He's obviously trying to thread the needle on it.
Yes.
And he's trying to...
which is what politicians do.
He is a politician.
Yes.
We can agree on that. And obviously he's trying to do his best, and Clinton is as well. I mean, they're doing pretty much the same thing here.
Oh, yeah. No, she's... I mean, as that one voter said, basically, I think you're a liar. And Hillary's answer was, about 5 minutes? And I still don't know what she said.
But they're definitely trying to do something to say you can be for we can have a certain amount of gun control on a state and local level without undermining the Second Amendment and taking away people's guns who are hunters and sportsmen and collectors and et cetera. They're trying to find a way to do that.
Yeah, and my response would be good luck with that.
And it may well fail. I have no great insight into how that well is going to work. But it's possible. I at least entertain the possibility that in approaching it that way, and it's merely a refinement of what Al Gore tried to do in 2000. It's not all that new. But to try to be a little more open and eager to talk about it, it might, sand down the rough edges there, or at least maybe a higher proportion of gun owners is not going to feel that this candidate is going to take away what I currently have. They're not out to get me.
Well, while we'll start touching on this gun issue a little bit, I did want to bring up a line that I just love from Mark Ambinder, who was talking about the debate and Brock's performance, which he said was his worst so far. But he said it probably wasn't going to matter much because Hillary is the reverse Teflon candidate, meaning that as opposed to absolutely everything bouncing off her and her escaping every attack, she has quite the opposite effect. And this whole gun thing when it came up over the bitterness line, like I mentioned earlier, Barack Obama was able to turn it around with this all of a sudden she's anti-Opie line. And if any candidate was singularly inequipped to capitalize on Obama's missteps on the snobbery angle, it would be Hillary.
I mean, certainly the recent polling would seem to indicate that. And this I think comes down to she's made a decision to try to fan the flames of these kinds of flaps.
Yeah, she has to.
That's the decision that she made. I think there's a real question whether she would have been better off. She was doing fairly well, jousting with Obama on matters of policy. She, in debates, has come across as more fluent when talking about policy and really shepherding the notion that she is the more qualified person for the job.
That reminds me of another clip that is flying around a lot of conservative blogs today. It's on The Corner, it's on Red State, it's on the Weekly Standards blog, it's on Hot Air, and that is a video from Frank Luntz's focus group of Democratic voters after the debate.
After yesterday's debate.
Yes, after yesterday's debate. And one of the focus group members making the point you just made was that Hillary sounds great on the issues, but she just doesn't have any charisma. But what most of the conservative bloggers are pulling out of the clip and what they love so much is, number one, just how within that focus group, how bitter and angry the Democrats got at each other, because you could tell which ones were kind of Obama, which were kind of Clinton leaners, when they were fighting over it. And then at the end, Luntz asked, for those of you that are McCain or Obama voters, how many will vote for McCain if Hillary wins, and vice versa. And it was surprising to me how many of them raised their hands. Like I know I've seen polling on this, but I always kind of discounted it. And I think just the last time we did this, I said I think after the race, the Democrats will congeal pretty quickly. But watching it live like that and hearing the Democrats in this focus group then afterwards talk about why they would support McCain over whatever candidate they didn't have. I still think Obama's going to win, but I would say it's more like 55% than the 70-80 I was earlier.
Okay, I didn't see the focus group. How did the focus group react to that first half of the debate when it was all tabloid? Was there a sense of any swaying from one candidate to the other during that?
No. If I remember, they both thought it was because of ABC's rules of not showing what was longer than 30 seconds clip
right.
or whatever. Frank couldn't show his normal, because normally he does those dials, and so you can see how people are reacting. But because of that rule, he couldn't show that. But he was describing it, and he said people's opinion went down. But he said I think he said they're also very upset at the moderators themselves. So I don't know how much
everybody loses.
Everybody loses.
And this, of course, is why there's so much popcorn being chewed on in conservative circles.
Yes, yes.
So one thing that I noticed that was interesting this week, maybe we should end on this, this ties in what we've been talking about. There finally seems to be a consensus in the conservative blogosphere what anti-Obama narrative they should push. They always had their Clinton script down.
Right.
They were kind of floundering for a couple of months. What do we say about this new guy? And now the snob, the elitist, is what has taken hold. We have a fresh logo.
Well, we have a poster, too.
Right. That this was created by Soren Dayton, is that right?
Was it? That seems to graphically...
Maybe it's something that he
glommed
onto and made a Facebook group out of.
Yes, I know he made the Facebook. I don't think he made that art.
So, is there joy in Mudville that we figured out where our narrative is going to be, and this is our way to ride this, or is there still a sense of defeatism? This can't really get us.
Is
I'm sorry.
I think you're overplaying how new this narrative is.
Now it's enshrined. Now it's enshrined. It's sort of official.
But before Michelle Obama was talking to a crowd in Ohio, I think, and she said she was trying to commiserate with him, and she said she knew how tough times were because her and Barack were having trouble scrounging together the tens of thousands of dollars it takes to send their kids to camps during the summer for piano lessons and sports, etc. And so this has been a running joke on the corner for months now. Is the poor Obamas and the tens of thousands of dollars they have to spend to send their kids to summer camp, and so the elitist, snobbish nature of the Obamas and portraying them of that is not new. Now they have, of course, a very grainy clip to attach it to, and because it. The Huffington Post kind of legitimized it in some ways. Thanks, Ariana. The mainstream media really kind of picked up more on it than they did before. So, I think you're definitely going to see that continue, and
it's really no different than the types of narratives that were pushed against Kerry and against Gore and against Dukakis.
How'd they do?
Well, Gore won. Kerry and Dukakis did not, and I think the question is, and I think it's an open question. One, is there a difference in the candidate that's going to make this harder to make stick, in both the candidate's life story and the candidate's demeanor on the trail?
Well, I would say the media is going to bail Obama out there. I don't know if you saw it, but earlier this week. Kind of right after the Bittergate was breaking, the Today Show did a story on Barack Obama, basketball player, and it was a set piece done by Brian Gumbel.
I saw that.
Yes, and it was a firsthand, unscripted insider look at Obama, and of course the subtext was, this guy's not windsurfer Kerry, this guy is Barack Obama, athlete. And so I guess to answer your question, yes, he's better positioned than Kerry, but I think the much bigger factor is that you're going to have the Brian Gumbels and the God, does Chris Matthews love Barack Obama? Oh my God, does he love him? Of the world.